whole 5 minutes late, man.
Yeah.
I apologize. Shabbat Shalom.
Repent, Trevor.
Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Get the chat pulled up. And continue counting the Omer. And we see the verse at the bottom. See how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. Shabbat Shalom, bro.
Shabbat Shalom, brother.
It's nice to be united with you.
Yeah, man.
Be in unity with you. And it's warming up. I got the air condition blasting a little bit because it's just a bit warm here. So Shabbat Shalom, Wendy. Shabbat Shalom, Hope is Yah, Zevia, Tabitha. Welcome.
Praise Yah. There's everyone. Everyone's coming on.
We got a lot to go over. Shabbat Shalom, Cindy. Shabbat Shalom, Lindsay. We have a lot of great stuff to go over today. The entitlement of this video is a wedding and a marriage contract? Question mark? Well, I didn't put question mark, but is that something that we're getting into as we keep on talking about how we're trying to get to the Ruth story, as is the tradition to read the story of Ruth at Shavuot. And that is within Judaism to this day, that they traditionally will read the story of Ruth at Shavuot. Well, we have some time because today is the fourth Shavua of counting the Omer. As we continue practicing that, Shabbat Shalom to Shemaiah and Aliyah and Amari, if they are there, and Shabbat Shalom Windfeather. Welcome. So where shall we begin? Let's begin with a shofar blast out the window. Shabbat Shalom to Zane. Welcome. Shabbat Shalom.
Dude,
That was,
you hit the high note, dude.
I got the high note. Praise Yah. It's a good day.
Wow. Praise
man.
God. Wow, man. That was good, dude.
Man,
wow.
I don't usually get that high note, but today is a special day, and I have a lot of very special information to go over today as we just continue on Yah's appointed time, his appointed Sabbath. And so let's go ahead and open in a word of prayer, and then we'll begin. Heavenly Father, Yahuwah Elohim, I pray that you be with us through this study as we begin switching gears a little bit to see if you really have arranged a type and sort and symbol of marriage with a particular bride, your people. Help us analyze that. Help us begin to be able to recognize that in the scriptures and understand that, but only according to your word, being a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our paths. And as how it points to our relationship to Messiah Yahushua. It's in his name we ask and pray. Hallelujah. Amen. So I have entitled this Part 1. I had to go ahead and do that even though I'm not sure where this is going. I'm doing this in faith that this is going to continue to flourish into a beautiful study. But before we get there, we have to go over the basics with counting the Omer And so let's get directly into this. Safar. Something interesting I noticed as we've looked at counting the Omer is to Safar the Omer. And what did I see this time? I saw something different. Now notice last week I had highlighted, or I don't know, at first I highlighted to speak, to talk, to tell out, because we're telling more of the story. But this time, what did I highlight out of here, if you can guess, that I noticed? When you look at things 2 times, you always see something different. And I saw, wow, to score with a mark as a tally or record. So mark, a mark, marking, guys, a tally, keeping track, keeping records. And this has to do with not only talking, telling, counting, telling the story, but having a mark. Why is that significant? Let's see if we can find that out. The Sabbath is a mark. What are we counting? We're counting 7 Sabbaths. We are marking off or tallying 7 Sabbaths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the morrow after the 7th Sabbath is Shavuot. This is what we are safaring and counting up to as we 7 ourselves, which is Shabbat, Feast of Shabbat, Shavuot, Feast of Sevens, Feast of Oaths. And oaths should start making us think about what's the oath? What is this? Are we swearing an oath with Yah? Are we in some kind of arrangement, some kind of contractual agreement? That's what we're thinking about. But this is significant, counting 7 Sabbaths, because the Sabbath, we know, is what? Is a sign or a mark. And we are marking off 7 marks. We're marking off 7 marks, 7 Sabbaths, as we safar, as we count. And, okay, Windfeather, your neck is hurting. In Yahushua's name, healing for you in your neck. Amen. But here we see, it says, and Yahuwah spake unto Moses. This is Exodus 31:12, saying, speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign or a mark between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am Yahuwah that doth sanctify you, or set you apart. You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy unto you. Everyone that defileth it shall surely be put to death. For whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days may work be done, but in the 7th is the Shabbat. In the Shabbat is the Shabbat of rest, holy to Yahuwah. Whosoever doeth any work in the Shabbat day, he shall surely be put to death. High penalty here, capital punishment. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Shabbat, to observe the Shabbat throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign, an oath sign between me and the children of Israel forever. And notice that word in Hebrew is oath, oath, oath. That is how to pronounce that word, oath. Surely that has come through from the Hebrew to English today. Oath, oath. For in 6 days Yahuwah made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And then look there at the bottom. And he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tablets of testimony or witness, tables of stone written with the finger of Elohim. So this was the second set of stones directly following this Sabbath covenant and this Sabbath teaching of the mark or sign between Yahuwah and Israel, his people. Now, let's look at this sign word, and let's, not get too far ahead, but remember we talked about last week grafting into Israel. That's why that's so important to understand how we graft into Israel. We become part of Israel. But here we see this is the word oath. It is a mark, miracle, and sign. Down here you see mark, miracle, ensign, token, and oath is the noun form, which comes from the verb form abba. It comes from this word abba. To sign, mark, describe with a mark. This is what oath has to do with in the Hebrew. And so the oath and the mark and the sign that is really setting us apart is the Sabbath, keeping the Sabbath holy. And that's very interesting how we are tallying, we are marking, sepharing 7 Sabbaths. We're marking those off. So I thought, wow, this is important. And remember, no pun intended, remember the day of Shabbat to keep it holy. Remember is this word zakur, and this is in the 10 Commandments. Okay, so Exodus 31 was finishing up just before he got the second set of the tablets of the covenant. The first ones were broken, symbolizing broken covenant. There's a second, there's a atonement. There's a day of atonement and a renewal at the Day of Atonement, that they get the second set of stone and tablets and witness, the testimony, the contract, what we're trying to get to. But Zakur, remember. Now let's look at this word, remember the Sabbath. Look at that. To mark. Zakor, zakar, a zakar marker. Another type of mark, properly to mark, to remember. And this is, let's see, this is the verb form. Let's see, if we go to, no, maybe that's all. Okay, that's all I did. I can't remember on that if that's the verb form or the noun form, but zakar again has to do with marking. So it's in the 10 Commandments. You might think that, well, it wasn't written in stone, it's not part of the 10 Commandments, that this is the mark that seals us, that this is what shows us to be his people. Well, it is in the 10 Commandments. It doesn't say it's an oath sign, but it says zakar the Sabbath, remember it, which is another form of marking it. So it is written in stone. This is an important mark of Yahuwah between him and his people. And that's why it was so important last week when we studied about what plant are we part of. Because we had to understand how we're part of the seed of Israel, how we're adopted, how there's one Torah for the homeborn and for the ger, the stranger alike. In fact, we'll look at that review after this. But what are we doing, guys? We're safaring, we're sevening ourselves, we're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's see if I can move that over a little. There we go. That's better. I can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Sabbath day in the week. Then we have to safar, count, tally, mark off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Sabbath weeks. Weeks of Sabbaths, periods of 7. Count off 7 Sabbaths to get to Shavuot. Are there other sevening ourselves? There is indeed. Karen Marie, I can't see what. Oh, lifting up wind feather. Amen. In Leviticus 23, what do we do yet again? Count off 7 months to another anointed time in the 7th month at the Feast of Trumpets, and then we get to the Day of Atonement in the 7th month. So we're counting off 7 days, 7 Sabbaths or weeks, and 7 months. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7th month for the fall feasts. Very important. What is going on with all this sevening? Is there more counting of 7s? We know that this reflects what when we count the 49 and 50? Let's see if I had a graphic for this next one. I did. The year of Jubilee. Leviticus 25:8, and you shall safar, number 7 Sabbaths of years. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months. And then in the years, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Every 7th year is a Sabbath. And then as it says, 7 times 7 years in the space of 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. So we have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Sabbaths of weeks of years. 7 weeks of years. The same thing we're doing now with the weeks of Sabbath days. We do it weeks of Sabbath years. So we're continually on a bigger and larger scale counting these Sabbaths. And Shabbat Shalom to Pepper Moon and William, welcome. Is there anything else? This gets us up to the Jubilee year. So that's the same thing, safaring, sevening ourselves. And could it be even on a larger scale? Safaring, counting, how about Sabbath, 7s of Jubilees? Well, if we do that from the time of creation, Jubilee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 Sabbaths of Jubilee years takes you to the 49th Jubilee and the 50th Jubilee, where the Exodus took place in the 49th Jubilee, and they entered the Promised Land in the 50th Jubilee. So it's even on a bigger scale than that.
Wow.
See the building blocks of how important this tallying, this marking, this recording, because it marks us. It's marking us. It's setting us apart. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. It looked like a scripture Shemaiah posted. So what a huge deal. And you know, so that caught my eye this time, that we are tallying off the Sabbath. So let's go ahead and start with let's do the Omer count today. And actually we did it last night, but so we don't really need to do it again, but we would say the blessing, Baruch atah Yahuwah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav vitzvanu al sefirat ha'omer. Blessed are you, Yahuwah Adonai, our Elohim, sovereign of all, who sanctifies us with the commandments, commanding us to count the Omer. And today we know is 28. It's 28, which is what? That's 4 out of the 7 that we have to tally off, mark off, kind of like if people have their calendars, you mark off each day that you live through. As the day happens, you mark it off, maybe at the end of the day. So where might we go from there? Let's just kind of remember, let's see, last week I had Numbers 30 written down, because as we are thinking of the oath word, with Sabbath being an oath sign, we know the stars are an oath sign, oath. We know we're counting up to the Feast of Oaths, Shavuot, Feast of Sevens, which has to do with swearing an oath. Circumcision is an oath sign. The rainbow is an oath sign. Did I say the sun, moon, and stars are for oath signs? But Numbers 30 verse 2 says, if a man vow a vow unto Yahuwah, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth. That's having to do with vowing vows or swearing oaths. You see the connection. There's slight variation, but a marital covenant and vow involves what? Vows. Covenant vows. You swear the vows as you're getting married to your significant other. And as we're counting to this Feast of Shavuot, this is from Jubilees 6. Jubilees tells us, for this reason it is ordained and written on the what? The Sepharim Hashamayim, Sephar, heavenly tablets, that they should celebrate the Feast of Shavuot, Feast of Oaths, in this month once a year, to renew the covenant every year. So renewing the covenant, renewing our oath, our vows. What kind of vows? And this whole feast was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And then Noah and his sons continued observing the Feast of Shavuot. So we see how this is what? Covenant renewal. Covenant renewal every year. But do we understand what we're renewing? That's what's important, is to kind of understand, well, what covenant are we renewing? Why? How does this work? This whole sevening ourselves. But Shabbat Shalom to Johnny Cool and Sue Shoshana. Welcome. Good name, Shoshana. That's a Hebraic thing there, sounds like. Let's see, so what is the next thing? Covenant renewal. Well, it says that that's for Israel. Let's see if we can remind ourselves. We went over that last week. The believers equal the branches in Romans 11. Israel equals the olive tree that he talks about there in Jeremiah 11:16 and Hosea 14:5 and 6. Messiah equals the root. So the root and the tree and the branches. And we see how we graft into Israel. We went over this. We studied this. We talked about the seed of Abraham. Because remember, the seed of Abraham we started looking at in the book of Jubilees as well. And Messiah preached about the seed of Abraham, of who the seed of Abraham is. And we see that in Galatians 3:29. It has to do with those of us being grafted in to the promise, who are also joined to Messiah. Abraham's seed is Israel. And then you see the picture there of the two sticks becoming one. It reminds us of two becoming one flesh, doesn't it? The two shall become one flesh. Marriage covenants, it reminds us of that. But in this instance, this is the house of Israel and the house of Judah, two houses of Israel that were divided and becoming one stick in Ezekiel's hand. So that's why that's, so important to remember. Isaiah 41:8, but thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Because that's why we had to go over that. See what plant we're a part of. Remember, Messiah is this plant of righteousness that Jubilees talked about. And we are supposed to be part of the same plant. Otherwise, we'll think, oh my goodness, the Sabbath, that's for Israel. That's not for us. We better not do that. That's only for Jews. And we would throw away this whole covenant of sevening ourselves if we don't understand the new covenant, what it's designed for in Jeremiah 31. In verse 31, it lays out the new covenant of the Torah being on our hearts. But it says, at that time of the new covenant, declares Yahuwah, I shall be the Elohim of all the Mishpachah clans or families of Yisrael, and they shall be my people. So here we see the laying out of the covenant, what it's designed to do. And we have this whole idea of the old covenant and the new covenant, and then we have the idea of the renewal of the covenant year by year. And we also have two sets of stones. The first broken covenant through spiritual idolatry, and then renewal, and that would have happened the second set of tablets close to the 7th month, around the Day of Atonement, so that it could all be renewed. And Shabbat Shalom to Jennifer and Wendy. Did you just... No, you've been here. But Shabbat Shalom again to Wendy. So that lays that out for us. Let's see if... Am I missing anything? The Feast of Oaths. Here's what Shabbat which is also the same letters of the number 7. To seven oneself, that is swear as if repeating a declaration 7 times. You see the idea of oath and swear. The Feast of Oaths, the Feast of Sevens. What is all this about that we're sevening ourselves up to the Feast of Shavuot? We really need to connect the dots of all this. And let's see. Oh, I skipped over. Okay, let's go back. Kind of all over the place here. Trying to figure out where we're at here. Last week we saw the lunar eclipse happened on May 5th, and that was for the second Passover. So we had the 15th day of the first month is Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. 15th day of the second month is the second Passover and second Feast of Unleavened Bread. We saw the lunar eclipse that happened that they would have witnessed in Israel, and on our calendar this did occur on the 15th day of the second month. We have another full moon that will take place on the 15th day of the third month for June 3rd and June 4th, the night in between our Shavuot celebration. So the moon is truly for Moedim this year. And we saw also what? Where they do the whole Omer gathering, an Omer of manna, where they get instructions of how to keep track of Sabbath, how to properly tally the Sabbath. And that was in what? That was on the 15th day of the second month. They received the manna, the bread from heaven, on the 15th day of the second month, the day following the second Passover, which is the 14th day of the second month, and they would have eaten it going into the 15th at sundown. And they say of the bread coming down from heaven, man who? What is it? Or could be said, what is he? Because in a sense there's no really it. There's more of he or she in Hebrew, but man who is what is he? And that's kind of interesting, considering if the manna was a symbol of Messiah, they're saying, who is he? What is he? They're asking this question, and in Hebrew it's man. It's in English we have it as manna, but in the Hebrew it's just man, and it has to do with what. And they're gathering and they're counting and they're sepharing, they're receiving this bread from heaven during this time where they start counting up to the commandments they will receive at Shavuot on the 15th day of the third month. So I did want to highlight, this is in Solomon's prayer, 1 Kings 3 through 8. Wow, 33 minutes in already. I just saw that. In Solomon's prayer it says, "And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a people great that cannot be numbered." And that cannot be numbered is manah, or sephard, or counted. They are too numerous to be counted. So there's this interesting play on words with manah and sephar, counting the Omer, and also with this word manna, which is in Hebrew to count, to number, to reckon. Now, I'm not sure all the connections there, but I think that's interesting when they get this manna, and they're counting out the proper portion of manna. And then there's this word associated with sepharing and counting, that is manna. That means to count, to number, to reckon. So I wanted to highlight that facet real quick of as we count and sephar, and see what else do we need to look at or review. I was thinking, do we need to review any more of Jubilees that we went over? Okay, there it is. Jubilees 36. See, my slideshow is all over the place here. Jubilees 36. And in the 6th year of this week, Yitzhak called his 2 sons Esau and Jacob, and they came to him, and he said to them, "My sons, I am going the way of my fathers to the eternal house where my fathers are. Wherefore bury me near Abraham, my father, in the double cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, where Abraham purchased a sepulchre to bury in the sepulchre which I dug for myself. There bury me. And this I command you, my sons, that you practice righteousness and uprightness on the earth, so that Yahuwah may bring upon you all that Yahuwah said that he would do to Abraham and to his seed." So here we go to Abraham's seed of what? Then it says, "And love one another, my sons, your brothers, as a man who loves his own soul, and let each seek in what he may benefit his brother, and act together in the earth, and let them love each other as their own souls." So this was when we were studying about the seed of Abraham last week. "And concerning the question of idols, I command and admonish you to reject them and hate them and love them not, for they are full of deception for those that worship them and for those that bow down to them. Hate idols. Remember ye, my sons, Yahuwah Elohim of Abraham your father, and how I too worshipped him and served him in righteousness and in joy, that he might multiply you and increase your seed as the stars of heaven in multitude." There's the mention of the seed as the stars of heaven. And remember, let's finish the verse. "And establish you on the earth as the plant of righteousness, which will not be rooted out unto all the generations forever. And now I shall make you swear a great oath, for there is no oath which is greater than it, by the name glorious and honored and great and splendid and wonderful and mighty, which created the heavens and the earth and all things together, that ye will fear him and worship him." I'll just stop it there. This is what struck us up to studying the plant of righteousness, which is Israel, which is Messiah's people. It's his brethren. And we also see this story in the stars, because remember, Abraham was told to sephar, count the stars. Can we find the evidence that he wasn't literally trying to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I just can't count them? Or is there something else going on that Abraham had to tell the star story? And do we find evidence in the stars? And of course we've looked at that. And you know what? Also, we looked in Jubilees chapter 1, and that Jubilees starts out with what? That they will fulfill my Torah, and it's being written for them so that they will know the Sabbath, the Sabbaths of years, and the Jubilees of years. They're counting the Sabbath years, the Jubilee years. If you're like me, you're observing the Sabbath year this year, and Lindsay's doing it as well. And what was the purpose of this? Is to count in Jubilees 1, count the Jubilees from the creation all the way to the new heavens and the new earth, the renewing of the earth, renewing of the heavens. To count the Jubilees all the way from beginning to end. That is what it opens up with, this counting concept, counting Sabbath years and Jubilee years, so that we can keep track all the way until what? The second coming of Messiah, the renewing of the heavens and the earth, and the new Jerusalem coming down. So we went over that. Just fascinating how important this sevening ourselves is. And we've been into the star story, safaring or counting or telling the stars. The seed of the woman, that's Bethulah or Virgo. Hebrew is Bethulah. It's virgin, means virgin. And we see that Al-Zamak is the star with the branch in her hand. This represents the seed of the woman. We pretty much have that nailed down. After her, we looked at Perseus, Peretz. And we need to start transitioning to this marital covenant. This is kind of hard to transition. I'm just going to try and say we're transitioning. We're going to start looking at, you see, standing on Perseus's shoulder, which in Hebrew this is Peretz, and it means the breaker. You see Andromeda, which we're going to look at today, and she's a chained woman. She's a bond woman. What's the story of Ruth? The story of Ruth is that she's a bond woman that has to be grafted in. And it shows how they trace the lineage once she marries Boaz and she's taken out of the bondage. They trace the lineage through Peretz, which means breaking forth, because he broke forth, and Peretz was Judah's son, Judah's seed, Judah's son, his first son born to Tamar, and there were twins in the womb, but Peretz broke forth and came out first. And the seed of Peretz cuts off Rosh Hashanah's head. Now it's Medusa. And we have to kind of navigate through a lot of these pagan stories, because what happened? The people, they would kind of tell whatever story would make sense for them to help them remember the stars, and they would tell it to their children, and they would kind of change the star story, but it essentially remains the same, even with the pagan highlights we have handed down today. If we look deeper into it, we see the scriptural story. So we have to get to Andromeda, which is standing on Peretz's shoulder. This is very significant. The demon's head, that's the name of the star in the forehead of that Medusa head that he cuts off. It reminds us of David and Goliath, and the serpent's head being crushed. And let's go ahead and highlight what we have coming up at Shavuot, we're going to see Mars is going to be in Cancer, which is the sheepfold, or the holding place, or even the segula, the treasured possession. Yahuwah says, I make you my treasured possession. So Mars being the covenant planet, this will be June 3rd, the night before, as we enter Shavuot. And you see Gemini, Venus is kind of joining Gemini. And so we're going to look at Gemini today as well in the star story, because this is significant. You see there? Two becoming one. And I looked into Gemini because I was looking with a focus on the star story, trying to think about marital covenant, and lo and behold, it is there. If we remember how we looked at the crab, it's an unclean crab today, but originally it was the holding place, binds, sartan in Hebrew, the encircling, in other words, the sheep pen, the sheepfold is what this is. And you see the stars named donkey because the donkeys were garters of the sheep. So this is all review, because this is significant what we're seeing at the time of Shavuot. So we need to get to, what do we need to get to? This concept in the story of Ruth, which in Ruth 3:9, it says, and he said, who art thou? And she, Ruth, answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. So this marital story, spread thy skirt over thine handmaid. Where do we see this very similar? We see this in Ezekiel 16. Now when I passed by thee and looked upon thee, behold, thy time was the time of love, and I spread my skirt over thee, and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear oath unto thee, and entered into a covenant with thee, saith Adonai Yahuwah, and thou becamest mine. So we see this concept of what spreading the skirt over has to do with this marital covenant agreement that Ruth and Boaz would come into. And that's what we're safaring, counting up to a significant time that tells us about this covenant and this marital agreement that Yahuwah comes into with his people. And so the first place I wanted to really look is, do I see this in the star story? Do I see this in the Mazzaroth, the zodiac? Because that's what Abraham had to look to, was the stars. So I had shared this picture the other night, and I said, it's all lining, it's starting to come into alignment. I think maybe this was a week ago about, and you see Venus down there, and Mars is up here, and they're progressing. And I didn't know what that meant, or if that meant anything at all. I just thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Today, this is pictured as two men. And so I've talked about this being a picture of the Father and the Son, which that's a possibility. Or the two houses of Israel. But what this more likely is two becoming one flesh. the bridegroom and the bride pictured in this constellation. And I thought, wow, there it is. This is one of the 12 major constellations that the sun passes through. Gemini is one of the 12 that the sun, moon, and planets travel through. They circle, they tell the story one time per year. And then this was last night, I took this little video. Yeah, I need to upgrade, but so now you see it's progressing a little bit. Venus and Mars, it looks like they're progressing up or off this way just a little bit. This is how they've moved in the time of a week. And what are they moving toward? Here you see the crab. See? So Mars there, you see, it's kind of between the crab and Gemini, and Mars, the red planet, it's going to progress and be right in the center of the crab, which is the holding place, which is the sheep pen, which is his treasured possession. And this is where these planets are. Remember, Mars is red. It's about the bloodletting. It's about the covenant with confirmed through blood. That's a very important concept. Going into his people, the sheep pen here. And Venus will kind of remain behind right there by the time of Shavuot. Venus will be between these two. And so it's like as though we're seeing this highlighting of the two becoming one flesh and the covenant happening between him and his people. So I thought that this was, wow, I finally put it together what this was about. So let's see if we can look at some more of the star story. Let's just go ahead and read this. And this was done by, I think Wadsworth is the man's name, who does the star story studies. But if you read each month and each of the 12 constellations that reflects the 12 months, and you study the theme in the stars and the star names, because remember the star names were given by Yahuwah. He named the stars, and the names were handed down and have somewhat changed from language to language, but they remain the same. If you study it out and get the themes of each constellation, this is what you read. The seed of the woman shall come. That's Bethula, Virgo. There shall be a price paid by him for a purchased possession. A segula, a possession. Mazanaim, that's Libra. The price shall be a conflict with the serpent foe and a wound in the conqueror's heel. That's a crab or Scorpio. He shall be sent forth swiftly, surely as an arrow from a bow. That's Kassit or Sagittarius. He shall be slain as a sacrifice. That's Gedi, Capricorn. He shall rise again and pour blessings on his people. That's Delhi, Aquarius. His people shall be in multitudes and held in union with each other. That's Dagim, Pisces, because there's a bond, a cord binding the two houses of Israel together. Another little bit of a form of the bond of covenant. And the two becoming one. He who was slain whose heel was bruised shall rule and shall tread his enemy underfoot. That is Aries, or Tela. He shall come and power triumphant and have dominion. That's Shur, or Taurus. He shall be the son of Elohim and the son of man, the victim and the ruler. That's Thalmim and Gemini, which we're going to look more at Gemini today. He shall hold fast his possessions, the reward of his work, and that's in Cancer. That's the crab, which is Claria in Hebrew. His segula, his treasured possession, which the covenant makes us his segula, treasured possession. He shall finally put all his enemies under his feet, commanding 10,000 of his saints, executing judgment upon all, separating evil from good. And that is Ariah, Leo the lion. So that's an amazing story. As we go around each year, this is what we should be able to understand in the constellations, in the star story. That's just amazing that it tells that story. So here's Gemini, and in Hebrew, Thalmin, the united. See, they're united. In the Coptic, it was Pi Machi, the united, the completely joined. So we see this concept of, in the ancient, they were two holding hands, becoming one flesh. And you see the star names: Pollux, ruler, judge; hurt, wounded, affected; set, seated, put in place. And then the decans, those are the other smaller constellations around it that kind of tell more of what Gemini is about. That's how the Decan constellations work. Decans has to do with 10 because it's 10 degrees, and there's 360 degrees in the circle of the stars, so they're broken up into decans, or tenths. So they're sectioned off. Okay, in ancient Coptic, Castor, which this is where you have to wade through. The Greeks symbolize that it means ruler or judge. Pollux, which the Greeks symbolize as Hercules, means who comes to labor or suffer. Is it buffering for anyone? Pepper Moon is asking. Let me know. Am I overheating or anything? Not here. Maybe it's just only Pepper Moon is having buffering. Good here, Lindsay says. Okay, we'll keep going. So Hercules means who comes to labor or suffer. The zodiac, according to the gospel and the stars, identifies their true nature, signifying ruler, judge, and one who comes to labor or suffer, as the dual function of Yahushua HaMashiach as king and ruler, and bridegroom to the called out assembly or church, it says here. So we are highlighting in Gemini Messiah and his bride, his plant, the bride being Israel, his people. Joseph Augustus Seiss, whose work helps provide the basis for this series, pointing to ancient texts, suggests the twins are really a man and a woman who figuratively represent Adam and Eve. More telling, they also represent the Son of Man, Yahushua, the greater Adam, or remember, the second Adam is Yahushua. So you see how this constellations are going to have dual meanings a lot, because it repeats, the story repeats throughout time. So you have the first marriage is Adam and Eve, the two becoming one flesh, and corruption creeps in. You see broken covenant, transgressed covenant, and there has to be a renewal. There has to be a second set of tablets, and that happens in the 7th month, the Day of Atonement, before the marriage supper of the Lamb, the Feast of Tabernacles. So there's this whole thing that takes place. The greater Adam, or second Adam, whose female companion is the called out assembly. Okay, I gotta keep scrolling down. The called out assembly, the bride, made from Adam's rib, is similar to the called out assembly coming from Yahushua. That's kind of interesting. He gets a wound in his side, and the wound in Adam's side it becomes Eve. So as a result of the wound out of Messiah's side, that's the covenant, that's the blood that his people he becomes one with. Well, Adam had his rib pulled out of his side, which became Eve. That became Adam's bride. This is really deep stuff, but Gemini in the original Hebrew, Arabic, and Syriac means completion. The marriage union of Mashiach and his called out assembly is described by the stars that comprised the constellation. According to the zodiac of Dendera, and that's the ancient Egyptian that they found, it all pictured, and it's ancient, so it's closer to the original source. The two depicted are a man and a woman holding hands. The figure in the Egyptian sphere has an appendage which signifies the coming one, the Messiah Prince, Seiss says. So we see in Gemini the marital covenant of bridegroom and bride becoming one flesh. Let's see if there's more to read. For some reason, my nose is really wanting to leak here. The bride, bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh, is for an everlasting union with him in glory and dominion, Seiss explains. The ancient Coptic name for the sign of Gemini is Pi Machi, which means the united and completely joined. In reality, Gemini is meant to set forth Mashiach and his called out assembly in that great marriage union, which is to be completed in the heavens during that very judgment period to which these last four signs refer. On the left foot of the first figure representing Mashiach is a star Al-Henna, which refers to him whose heel was to be bruised. The principal star on his head is Pollux, the ruler and judge. In the center of his body, another star, Wasat, which means seated or put in place, describes what is Christ in connection with his marriage with his called out assembly. The second figure representing the called out assembly is conjoined with the first figure. They are two and yet they are one. He in them and they in him, so that what is his is theirs and what is theirs is his. Gemini is Elohim's sign in the heavens of the coming marriage and union of the seed of the woman, Virgo, with his redeemed called out assembly, Seiss argues. So this is very fascinating information because I had not seen this, and It should have been popping off the page of the heavenly tablets at us that this is what this is a picture of the twins, but because the pagan stories creep in and cloud our mind as to what is really going on. I think this cold air conditioning might be making my nose run, so I'm gonna cut that off and just go with the windows for now. Excuse me, everybody.
Beautiful day here in Asheville. I tell you what, we are blessed, man.
Amen.
It's gonna be a good day to go out and do some street preaching, Trevor. We gotta do it, man. We gotta do it, bro.
I'm trying to get through this preaching.
Well, you gotta
okay.
Praise God.
What's next? So that's Gemini. Now we have Andromeda, the bondage of those he will redeem. Andromeda, Hebrew, it's Sirah, the chained. And Persea, the stretched out. That's interesting that this Persea star is in Andromeda, because we'll see in a minute. At Dendera, it is the Egyptian Set, seated as a queen. The brightest star in Arabic is Al-Firat, the broken down. The next bright star in Arabic is Mirak, the weak. The next after that in Arabic is Al-Amak, struck down. And then you see Jeremiah 14:17. Therefore thou shalt say this word unto them, let my eyes run down with tears night and day, and let them not cease. For the virgin Betula, is that virgin daughter of my people, is broken with a great breach, with a very grievous blow. So Andromeda is this picture of chained and bound, and she's breaking free, and she's suffered a grievous blow. And we talked about breach and the similarities there with Peretz being a breach or breaking forth. So that's very interesting. And then Andromeda, some more information about this constellation. Remember, she's on the shoulder of Peretz, who is the seed of Judah, the messianic seed. For Yahuwah has called you like a woman forsaken and grieved in spirit, like a youthful wife when you were refused, says your Elohim. There we see, youthful wife. For a mere moment I have forsaken you, but with great mercies I will gather you. With a little wrath I hid my face from you for a moment, but with everlasting kindness I will have mercy on you, says the Lord Yahuwah, your Redeemer. So this woman that was in bondage, but she gets redeemed. This sounds like exactly like the story of Ruth and Boaz. Andromeda is the final decan in the story of Pisces, and the mystical fish people always have to kind of wade through this mystical stuff and pagan stuff, but she appears to be a healthy young woman in a seated position with chains on all four limbs. Her head is usually bowed as if despairing of help. Her dress has been torn, exposing one breast having been ravaged or taken advantage of. The Greeks told the following story about this woman. Andromeda was the daughter of Cepheus and Cassiopeia, two other constellations we will later discuss. We won't, but her uncle Phinehas was in love with her, but she didn't love him. The other gods were so angry they sent the sea monster Cetus to pillage. And this is the stuff, this is the story that was told, because remember, they had a story that what's up there, let's try and teach our children a story to help them remember it, kind of thing. And they made up their own stories. But Cetus, to pillage the countryside, because the nymphs for the land, who were her competitors, were jealous of her. Jupiter Ammon at last decreed that Andromeda be chained to a rock near Joppa in Palestine to be devoured by Cetus, and luckily for her, she was rescued by Perseus, who married her. Now this is where we see the connection. What? She's standing on Peretz's shoulder, and they maintain the marriage of Andromeda to Peretz. So Perseus, Peretz, the seed of Judah, the messianic seed, sets her free, and they get married. So we see that this marital story between the chained woman who was in the bondage, she gets set free, that remains, even though some of these stories are questionable. Where are they getting this stuff? Well, they maintained the original story of what's supposed to be pictured, of Messiah being married to his bride of Israel. So when we start looking at this is quite fascinating. Let's read some more about the meaning of this constellation. In Isaiah 54, look how it starts out. Thy maker, thine husband, Yahuwah of hosts is his name, husband. And thy redeemer, Peretz represents the redeemer, and Boaz, the kinsman redeemer. The Holy One of Israel, the Elohim of the whole earth shall he be called, for Yahuwah hath called thee as a woman forsaken and grieved, that's Andromeda, in spirit, and a wife of youth, when thou wast refused, saith thy Elohim. For a small moment have I forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee. In a little wrath I hid my face from thee for a moment, but with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on thee, saith Yahuwah thy Redeemer. For this is the waters of Noach unto me, for as I have sworn that the waters of Noach should no more go over the earth, so have I sworn that I would not be wroth with thee, nor rebuke thee. That's swore, oath, the oath. I won't flood the earth again. For the mountains shall depart, and the hills be removed, but my kindness shall not depart from thee, neither shall the covenant of my peace be removed, saith Yahuwah that hath mercy on thee. And now here's the afflicted woman. See if I can. O thou afflicted, tossed with tempest. And I think that's the word Sirah in Hebrew, that tossed with tempest. As you see, Andromeda was called Sirah originally in Hebrew. And not comforted, behold, I will lay thy stones with fair colors, and lay thy foundations with sapphires. Now, why is this significant? Because this is relating this woman to the bride, New Jerusalem. This is all bridal talk, and Messiah's bride is what? It's the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation. And I will make thy windows of agates, and thy gates of carbuncles, and all thy borders of pleasant stones. And all thy children shall be taught of Yahuwah, and great shall be the peace of thy children. And so the children of the New Jerusalem are those taught of Yahuwah. and that's the seed of the woman. Remember, the dragon is wroth with the seed of the woman, and that's because we supposed to go into the New Jerusalem. So this marital covenant pictured here very clearly in the star story. And we see this also in Isaiah 51:21. Therefore hear now this, thou afflicted and drunken, but not with wine. Thus saith Adonai Yahuwah, or thy Adonai Yahuwah, and thy Elohim that pleadeth the cause of his people. Behold, I have taken out of thine hand the cup of trembling, even the dregs of the cup of my fury. Thou shalt no more drink it again, but I will put it into the hand of them that afflict thee, who have said to thy soul, bow down, that we may go over, and thou hast laid thy body as the ground and as the street to them that went over. And it continues into the next chapter, Isaiah 52, and there it is. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion, put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. So afflicted, the New Jerusalem, this marriage of Messiah and the New Jerusalem. This is marital talk. The wedding garments, the linen. For henceforth there shall no more come into thee the uncircumcised and the unclean. That's New Jerusalem. Shake thyself from the dust, arise and sit down, O Jerusalem. Loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. That's Andromeda, captive daughter. For thus saith Yahuwah, ye have sold yourselves for naught, and you shall be redeemed without money. So we see the connections of this woman afflicted, this chained woman, who will eventually maybe get to actually reading Ruth and Boaz, who was in bondage and she became grafted in. Let's see, what else do we see? The cup. We read the cup, and that's significant because here's another angle of the star story. If I can, you see me zoom in, you see there the woman Virgo and Leo the lion, and the cup, which is called crater. This is the cup of wine of wrath, and not only will that be poured out on the serpent there, that's Hydra, the serpent, but Leo the lion and the woman will drink of the cup of wine, and that's very significant, of course. What happens with Messiah? They drink the blood of the covenant. Let's see if I have this here. At his first coming, he says, this cup in my blood represents the blood of the covenant, and then he sheds his blood the next day. But he says, I won't drink of the cup again until I drink of it with you in my Father's kingdom. So the cup of wine is a symbol in the ancient Hebrew wedding that would be drank between the bride and the groom to seal the covenant, which you see that in Matthew 26:28. Yahushua's phrase here reflects a bridegroom offering the covenant of marriage with the betrothal cup, paying the price of his blood. This is the betrothing cup. And also disclosing the bride price, his own life on the cross. When the disciples drank from the cup, they ratified the covenant. And down here, once the bride sipped from the betrothal cup, the covenant between them was sealed. This happened in a ritual called Kiddushin. Kiddushin, which has to do with Kodesh. And afterwards, the bride was set apart to her husband. Now, the marriage supper won't happen until we drink the cup again with Messiah in the new covenant at the marriage supper of the Lamb, which is pictured in the fall feasts at the Feast of Tabernacles. So the cup in the star story is another very significant thing that I wanted to highlight that tells this story. Whoops. Let's see, what else do we have? Psalm 19:1. So are we not seeing that the heavens safar, the heavens declare the glory of Elohim, and his handiwork shows, the firmament shows his handiwork. So remember, Paul quotes Psalm 19 saying how they knew the gospel. The stars told them the gospel so that nobody had an excuse. Here it is. The heavens safar. There's our word safar.